Hector, you now work for Rhino Security, and we have you billed as a former black hat hacker because we can't put your history all in a title. You could devote 1 or 2 pages to it. So as quickly as possible, let's go with your background. The former black hat hacker, there's a little bit more details to that.
Sure. So I was, I would say I was a black hat for a long time, somewhere between 15 to 20 years, started in the late 90s. And for the most part, I was more a gray hat. Towards the end of that, I became a hacktivist, which was a major mistake on my part. But I tell you, for the most part, what I'm really known for, or what I'm infamous for, is leading the operations for Anonymous or LulzSec. Did a lot of hacks during that time. I'm not proud of it. I've definitely moved on from that lifestyle. But that's a quick gist as to what it is. Some of the operations I was involved in was the uprising in Tunisia. I participated in attacks against the Tunisian governments. Same with Egypt, Syria, Libya, Zimbabwe. And I was convicted for most of those attacks against the governments, as well as federal contractors and eventually the FBI, which ultimately led to my downfall.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into what you're doing now. Can you explain a little bit what you're doing with Rhino Security?
Sure. So I've been given a beautiful opportunity to kind of start fresh. And that mindset started in prison, really finding myself and realizing what it was that I was doing wrong, and really realizing I was about to lose not only my life, but my family. I had 2 little girls, and the risk and the losses and all that stuff, it wasn't just adding up. So as soon as I came out of prison, I began the process of proving myself, which was doing the bug bounty programs, participating in responsible disclosure. I know IBM's here. I released a few bugs for them. So, I really went through the process of really trying to prove myself to the community. Now for Rhino, I'm the director there for assessments, meaning I run the teams. I make sure that our engagements are good. We're running social engineering, red team / adversary simulations on a day in and day out. And I would have to say for the last 20 years, I've been on the offensive side. Now, I would say in the white hat side.
So you do a lot also with hiring for your company, as you have told me before. And, so we know there is a skills gap when it comes to cybersecurity. So as your role as a hiring manager, you know what you're looking for and you know what is or isn't out there. So what is missing in our workforce when it comes to talent?
Well, I'll be honest with you, and I'm sure many of you in this room may agree or may have seen this yourselves. We either have a talent shortage or we have a skill shortage. There are a lot of great universities and colleges out there that now they're offering cybersecurity programs. But even then, when those folks come out of school, their experience is academic at best. And it becomes difficult for you to try to integrate them into whether it's a defense side, a blue team, or on the other side, as an offender, as a researcher or pen tester. It becomes difficult to really integrate them. And so what we're seeing now is, what I'm seeing mostly, is that a lot of these, I would say the new generation of cybersecurity personnel are really needed. But we also need to invest time, effort, and resources into training. And that's going to be a major issue moving forward.
So let's talk about that, because we've talked about it before, and I know that you have some strong opinions when it comes to the current training that is out there right now. So let's sort of break down what you think about that, whether it's, mid-career workforce training or things like that. How do we further that, and where are the holes in that right now?
Well, I had a great conversation with Greg. This guy is awesome, he's really thoughtful and insightful. And one of the things that I really wanted to bring up here and to him was the fact that, yes, there are colleges providing cybersecurity programs. Now, let's say that someone is mid-career. They want to switch over to the cybersecurity industry. Well, where do they start? You have the SANS Institute, which is a great organization. You have, the Offensive Security Program, the OSCP, which is another fantastic hands-on experience-heavy organization or training program. But they're costly, And so even moving further than that. Now, what if you want to bring someone into your team that has an associate-level skill? You really need a Windows defender. And so you bring in someone like SpectreOps, which is probably one of the top Windows-specific security companies out there. And I sent one of my guys for training there, and it was a pretty hefty bill. The point is that we need to figure out a way to open up the resources, or give them more training or have more programs available. And I know of at least one, and I'm sure there are many, But I know of at least one nonprofit organization that's taking young teenagers or young adults from the poorer neighborhoods of New York and Dallas and other places and putting them through a pretty extensive security training program funded by like Symantec and JP Morgan. It would be nice to see more of that. And we kind of need to have that conversation more. Like, what else can we do? Can we even start a little bit younger? Can we start talking about cybersecurity in high schools or in some other way?
So talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing when somebody applies for a job at Rhino Security and you are going through resumes and sort of the difference between what is on a resume and what happens when you get somebody in for an interview and you actually walk them through their skills. Talk to me about your experience there.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm very open-minded. I was a newbie at one point in my life, so I've, no disregard for that. I like to, at this point in my life, I'm mentoring a lot, I'm training a lot. But what I'm seeing is if someone's applying for an associate level position as a pen tester or as a researcher, their skill set and their experience is probably a lot lower than an associate level position. Now, when I have someone applying for a senior level position, they're right above an associate level in terms of experience and in terms of like a real world, work history. So it becomes difficult to really, hire. There was one example I gave you on the phone when we last spoke, which was, and mind you, I'm not downplaying their experience, but we had two former agents from the NSA that applied to the company, and these were fantastic gents, and they talented in so many ways, well-spoken, really nice guys, but their job at the agency was so segmented that kind of integrating them into our organization would have been extremely difficult. It would have taken us a lot of time and resources just to get them prepared for the kind of jobs, the kind of work that we do.
So let's talk about that a little bit further. What do you think needs to be done in order to get more talent into government? Because the government has a workforce shortage, and there are rigorous security clearances to go through, and there's lots of other things that go into that. But obviously, the government needs hackers just as much as the private sector does. So, what do you think needs to go into government hiring in order to change that?
Well, again, going back to what I said before, I think that it is important that we emphasize research and training and education. The academia is extremely important, but it also starts with every one of you in here in this room right now. When you go home and speak to your family members and young cousins and nephews and nieces, you start talking to them about the cybersecurity industry, and you also point them in the direction of government work. At the end of the day, listen, with the way things are right now and the kind of shortages that we're seeing in this country, we need to all, very similar to what Mr. Coates said a few minutes ago. We all need to work together to really solve this problem. This is a human element problem, and it really touches us on all facets of life. Now, in terms of government getting more employees, again, you may even find yourself in a situation, and I think this may be impossible, but bear with me here, where you may have to lower requirements a little bit. I think the FBI has already done that, or part of that, where they're lowering requirements for certain fields, and that's a great first step. It doesn't mean that you have to bring in someone like me. I understand the government cannot hire someone like me, but there are a lot of talented folks out there that just don't have the proper education. They don't have the resources, and they didn't have the networking capabilities to land themselves at a good job and have a good career before they apply to the government. So that's just my idea there. So
let's go back to that compartmentalized part that you were talking about. Expound upon that a little bit. When you say that these NSA applications came through and they were working in more compartmentalized fields.
It's a good word.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, and what can be done to make sure that when they leave the public sector that they can get hired and they aren't fine-tuned to one thing?
Sure. Well, I think that and I want to bring this to you as well as possible. When it came down to these individuals, one had experience with internal network penetration testing, which is great, but their skills were very specific to using a specific amount of tools. They knew how to use Nmap. For some of you that don't know, Nmap is a network mapper, very simple port scanner. They had an understanding of how Nessus and things like that work. But beyond that, that was their experience. With the other example, that person was more on the logistics side of things, which is aggregating the reports, aggregating the raw data, putting together a debrief. And that's very important in a reporting environment where you have to report, but you have to understand one thing. Even the most associate person in my company right now is doing all of that plus more. And it's difficult to have to invest a lot of time and resources into someone that's so segmented. Again, that's not a knock to them. They just didn't work in our environment. But for some of your organizations, that may work very well, where you may be able to adapt them into your environments and maybe do some training with them, or maybe expands their responsibilities a bit. But for a company like Rhino, where we're still growing and we really don't have I would say the time and resources for that. I mean, we're going. We're doing at least 10 engagements a week. We're doing social engineering campaigns into the thousands. And so I can imagine the rest of the organizations out there, other security companies, or even government agencies that are smaller, from smaller towns, they probably are dealing with the same kind of problems that we're facing.
So what are the skills that you are looking for, like on the technical side, like you were just talking about, the Windows Defender and Spectre Ops?
Sure.
Are you looking for people that know all the different operating systems? Are you looking for people that just focus on mobile? Are you looking at people that are just good at social engineering, or are you looking at it holistically?
Well, it depends, right? So it depends on what their niche is. So if they're really good at social engineering and they can get on the phone and make a really convincing phone call, then that's fantastic. We also want to explore their reporting capabilities. You have to understand that in the kind of work that we do, part of what really sells our work is the debrief. We need to be able to translate these vulnerabilities or the issues in the customer's attack surface in a way that the customer understands. Not every customer we deal with is going to be a CIO or a CSO or chief of security or head of security. We're going to end up with attorneys sometimes. Sometimes some organizations, their security contracts are managed by a legal team. And in those situations, we need to be able to describe the issues and the solutions. Now, if we bring in someone that's really talented in one aspect of the job, but they have very bad communication problems, or they're unable to explain how they got into the systems in the first place, it kind of defeats the purpose.
So there have been studies that have shown among the younger generation that not only is cybersecurity not growing, they're not even aware of it being a career field. So you talked a little bit about it, but talk a little bit more about what needs to be done in order to get younger people involved in cybersecurity.
Well, it's all about outreach. Even if like I said before, it takes all of us, right? Even if you guys take 5 minutes to talk to your nephews or cousins or maybe young adults that you identify as someone that hasn't chosen their path yet, especially a very smart person that they're in their early 20s and they're stuck at retail, and they could probably do this kind of job, then fine. Have that conversation, tell them to add me to LinkedIn. They can ask me all the questions they want. I'll gladly provide the resources to get them started to at least take that first step into this industry. At the end of the day, the cybersecurity industry is still in its infancy. Less than 20 years ago, you barely had any security companies at all. And the government, as well. I mean, it was a very tough time. But now we're in a different state. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You have a whole bunch of tools and vendors and training programs. You have a bunch of stuff that's out there, and there's not enough folks that even know about this stuff. Listen, I came from the hood. I speak to a lot of people in my area, and some of these guys never even heard of what it is that I do. They know of hacking. They're like, oh, you're that hacker guy. I saw you on TV. That's so cool. But I'm like, no, there's way more to that. Trust me, hacking is actually the most boring job here. But it's what you do with these talents is what really makes or breaks your career. And I think that if we could have these kind of conversations and let the young people know, the next generation, or even the millennials now, they're kind of stuck in the middle, I think we're gonna really improve our situation.
Great. Hector, appreciate your insights on this. It's so refreshing to hear a different perspective on this. So
thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.